did they move to Aberdeen Avenue?
I don't know. I get maybe because of the growth, new families. Yeah, that's all I can think of.
Well, everybody was moving. I mean, the temple.
Yeah, the West.
Everyone moved
A lot of the Jews were moving. I mean, it's the same reason probably that the Addis Israel moved to Main Street West.
from Canada.
Yeah,
It was
I have memories of that synagogue too.
Well, from what I understand, it was like everyone used to shul hop on the high holidays.
Yeah, that's right. They go and visit.
But it was also a time of upward mobility in the 50s.
That's right.
And from what I understand, at that time, the conservative movement was the movement. Like, they had the status almost, and they were the biggest shul in town.
Well, the Beth Jacob wasn't conservative when my grandfather went there. He left the Addis Israel because he felt some of the pillars of the synagogue were hypocrites. They kept their stores open on Shabbos. And he was Shomer Shabbos. And many of the founders of the Beth Jacob on Park and Hunter were Shomer Shabbos. So it wasn't conservative, it was Orthodox. And then somehow, I don't know where the transition started, but somehow the conservative heresy snuck in and took over.
After they moved to Aberdeen.
Is that what it is? Is that
became affiliated.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's sort of what was going on at the time.
Yeah.
Everyone wanted to sit together. It was assimilation.
That's right. Yeah, it was considered a big criticism that you can't sit with your wife or your daughter. And some guys, of course, said, well, I don't see that that's a problem.
In your family, was it a problem?
No, it didn't matter either way.
I spoke to Goldie Robbins, who's a lot older than you, I know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she said she hated sitting with the women. And that her biggest thrill as a little girl
Was to sit with her dad and her brothers and all that.
Yeah.
I guess it all depended on the state of your psyche, what you felt about your family.
But she also said that the women's section was always upstairs, and the old ladies, it was really hard for them to get up there to climb those stairs.
Yeah, well, it probably was.
But no one cared.
No, that was another burden that the female had to bear.
Exactly. But when it was interesting, when they built Aberdeen Avenue, they actually built a women's balcony that was never used, or that was used for a very short time, and then very soon after they moved to Aberdeen, they went mixed seating.
Yeah.
But that's not, you weren't involved in, it sounds like.
In what?
You weren't that involved once they moved to Aberdeen.
No, I was involved in that balcony, though. One New Year's Eve, they had a party, and Larry Goldblatt and Larry Bacon and I had a grapefruit fight. And we were throwing grapefruits at each other, those who had escaped to the balcony. And I can still remember those grapefruits going up that balcony. It was a marvelous fight.
Aberdeen Avenue balcony?
Yeah.
Do you remember Rabbi Wiener?
Yeah.
What do you remember?
Kind of lean, sincere, and somewhat vague. Seemed like a nice enough chap.
Well, you were probably a little too old to be caught up.
Yeah, I wasn't. That's right. Yeah, I wasn't. He wasn't part of my psyche.
Like, what was so special? What was so unique about the Hunter Street Shul?
Well, the people, the families had an intensity, and they shared a common purpose. There wasn't a lot of luxury. They were still struggling to earn livings and to achieve some kind of economic security. And they all shared that. So there was a sense of a shared purpose, and there was a kind of a charisma about it too, because it was such a intense contrast to the world outside. Because you still had deaconing, meaning the priests came up and gave the blessing. They still had full talesum. I know it's not like, but nevertheless, they still had the separation of the men and the women up in the balcony, and you could see the women. You know, they were right at, looking right down, and as a result, it had a charismatic quality, the synagogue, and it was out of the ordinary, and the parties that they had for the bar mitzvahs and the weddings there were really joyous occasions. People relished having a banquet. It wasn't common and taken for granted. You know, it was a nickel was still a very powerful piece of currency and valued and respected. So there was a lot of shared attitudes towards society and religion and to life and to the various rituals, you know, that marked stages of life, bar mitzvahs, funerals, wedding. So it's something that I'll never forget, of course, and my memories of it are wonderful. Okay.
It's amazing feeling envious of a time of struggle, like the way that I have no experience of feeling that way about a synagogue from my generation, and hearing that and feeling nostalgia for it, even though it's a time of struggle.
Yeah, right.
So bizarre.
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
You talked about the aura. Can you just say, what do you mean when you say aura?
Well, something that is extra, that emanates from a person or from a place. There's a kind of celestial, supernatural element to an aura. You know, it has an extra power, and the Beth Jacob Synagogue had that. And as I said, in its geography, a lot of the characters were colorful. Another word for it is there was a lot of Gemütlichkeit. You know, that they shared this sense of more than excitement, a kind of camaraderie, where they all looked out for each other. And I can remember my grandfather's funeral in the Hever Kadisha, coming to his house and the way they looked after things. It was wonderful. So it was an extra special place.
Can you just say a few words about the Hever Kadisha in those days? Where were bodies taken?
On Vine Street. I think they took them to Vine Street.
So tell me about the Hever Kadisha and your grandfather.
Well, the Hever Kadisha were a lot of his friends, Isaac Levy, Ruby Levy, I think one of the Pagans. So they would look after the body and prepare it for the grave, etc. And they would drive the hearse. I think one of the Schwartzes drove the hearse, but they were all people that you knew. So the funeral took on an aspect of you're still in the midst of friends. It wasn't cold and impersonal.
Was the body prepared at home or at Vine Street?
I can remember the night my grandfather died, they used to have a man who would sit with the body all night so he wouldn't be alone. And that man who sat with my grandfather was Lou Davidson's father. And he sat there with my grandfather's body all night. So I assume that they took the body away to Vine Street and prepared it there. There was intellectual, atmosphere built into the rituals. For example, in Shul 20, 25, 30 men would sit around with the rabbi arguing about the meaning of a text. And even during the Shabbos services, when you look at the mufter and the Torah readings, there's commentary at the bottom. I have a colleague of mine, he's a Christian, and he said he went to a bar mitzvah a couple of months ago, and he said there was more commentary than there was text. And I said, well, that's the way it's done. You know, that's part of the tradition. So that had an effect on me too. You can't discount that. It wasn't just Rabbi Burak, Rabbi Lichtiger. It was also my grandfather too. I can still remember him putting honey on the siddur when he was teaching me the alphabet.
Say more about that.
Well, I didn't lick the honey, but I saw it was there, and I knew that it tasted good. So I read the text and listened to what he had to say.
Your grandfather?
Yeah. I also had lessons from Shoichet, who killed the chickens, and he put his finger on the text, and there was a feather with blood on his finger. So I said, I better learn this stuff, or else, look what's going to happen.
You learned your Aleph Bet from your grandfather?
Yeah.
At home or at Shul?
No, in his grocery store on York Street. He had a grocery store, 176 York Street,
Rosenberg's.
Rosenberg's Grocery.
I heard about that.
Yeah. I had about 10 years ago, had somebody come up to me in the Westdale Delicatessen and say, you're Leibish Rosenberg's grandson, aren't you? And I said, yeah, how do you know? He said, because you have the same color hair. He was called the Weissekopf because he had white hair when he was a young man. And then she said to me, he was the most honest man in Hamilton. He used to give groceries in the Depression, and you didn't have to sign anything, and you didn't have to pay right away. You paid when you wanted to. And then one day I visited the Addis Israel on Main Street, and Rabbi Green took me upstairs where they took one of the marble blocks that have all the members' names engraved, and there was my grandfather, Leibish Naftuli Rosenberg, treasurer. And Rabbi Green said, you know why he was the treasurer? Because he was honest. So it's a marvelous heritage and legacy that I got from my grandfathers and from the milieu that I grew up in. The great, rich, wonderful impact, and also a source of solace, as I grow older. It's a source of riches. Eitz Chaim, it's a tree of life.